They have crossed this invisible line, and now clearly there's no way to come back from it. The best case scenario would be to try to carve out liability protections for smaller tech companies. Net, do you get a better environment at the end of the day? I don't know. Section 230. What's happened is that President Trump has vowed to veto the NDAA, the National Defense Appropriations Act. And I guess every year this act needs to be signed, and it basically gives the military their budget. And he has said that if Congress doesn't put language in there to strike down Section 230, he's going to veto it. We've been talking about it on the show, just the level of tech censorship that is going on is frankly abhorrent. It is completely unacceptable. And they have crossed this invisible line, and now clearly there's no way to come back from it. And although, if you'd watched the show a month or two ago, I did say, getting rid of Section 230 would actually help the tech monopolies and hurt the tech startups, because even your, right-wing kind of content platforms like Gab, they'll say, we want 230 in place, right? They're saying don't get rid of 230. But and the reason why, I said on the show that 230 would actually help the tech monopolies is because the smaller tech competitors will naturally have less resources to comply with the new legal environment. And because now these tech businesses will have less of a liability shield from the content that is posted to their site, ultimately that could really hurt smaller tech startups, the Pinterest of the world and your smaller tech companies. Even Pinterest is now public, but there's a lot of kind of smaller, even just a few $100 million in valuation. You don't have a lot of sparse resources. You don't have extra resources hanging around like the large tech monopolies do. And so if 230 goes away, presumably now you could have a lot more litigation, lawsuits. You got to invest in more compliance and just more things that weren't on the product roadmap to accelerate growth. We saw this with GDPR as a great example of this, right? Of Google and Facebook winning because of GDPR, when in fact GDPR was supposed to actually kind of handicap or penalize Google and Facebook, and it actually hurt everyone else, but helped the big tech monopolies. So, what would happen in a post Section 230 environment? How would it actually all shake out? And so I think we had Tim Kendall on, one of the early guys at Facebook, and he went on to Pinterest, and he's in that Netflix documentary about the problem with content platforms, social networks like Facebook, really kind of just feeding this incendiary content, much of it fake, and actually the fake content actually performing better on the platform's algorithms, right? Because it gets more engagement out of its audience, this kind of very abrasive, triggering content, right? And how that's a real problem. And now he's kind of come out, he's testified in front of Congress about it, around that matchmaking algorithm specifically. We went very deep into that topic. In that environment with no 230, theoretically, a Facebook, a Google, and even an Amazon would now be liable for fake information that is being published and distributed on the platform. What would be interesting to see is how do they handle this around fake information, right? Which now they are going to be liable for. Whereas before, there was kind of here nor there. Technically, the publishers, let's say the media, is responsible for publishing fake information, and they can be held liable for it. Doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen, and it has happened, and could continue to happen. But again, the media companies don't have a lot of money, so they don't really have the biggest target on their back. Thanks to Facebook and Google, have basically destroyed the media company's business model, as we also spoke about that with Tim. So presumably, it would force the large content platforms, Twitter included, theoretically any content platform and every content platform, to have much stricter controls on what content is published on the platform. There's a lot of implications for that. Net, do you get a better environment at the end of the day? I don't know. It will certainly change things. I don't know if it'll be for better or for worse. Certainly, I think you'll see Facebook and Google and Twitter and any of these big content platforms that have a lot of money, that have a big target on their back, need to reassess how they handle this. But presumably, if they're caught distributing information which is, fake and committing libel and fraudulent and all, whatever the existing laws are that you could essentially sue a media company if they're spreading fake information about someone, or defamation lawsuits, right? Then now the tech companies would also have similar liability in the distribution of that content. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, but I do think it is a very real possibility that that is the environment we're operating in. And, if anything, the best case scenario, I would say the best case scenario would be to try to carve out liability protections for smaller tech companies. I think that would still be the case, right? Just think about all the controls you'd have to put into place, all the people, all the human filtering and software tools you'd have to put into place to properly comply with some new standard, right? There'd have to be some kind of benchmark of performance, industry norm, right? To say the information is flagged as being fraudulent or defaming or, hits a threshold and the platform has to take it down, and they've got to build in all these internal controls. It would be a gargantuan effort, and ideally something that could actually help level the playing field if the burden of that is predominantly put onto the large tech monopolies, the large tech content platforms, and not the smaller ones. I don't think that would come in this first wave. If this thing is struck down, Section 230, then it just goes away. But again, this is Congress and they write the laws, so they could in negotiation, if kind of put some carve-outs in there. I'm sure big tech is trying to get a carve-out for themselves rather than the small tech companies, right? They don't really have a voice on Capitol Hill. That's the irony in all of this. But nonetheless, that would be the ideal, I think, is to have a carve-out for the smaller tech players. Interestingly enough, I actually think there is also a segue into this around products for Amazon, right? We've spoken before on just fakes and counterfeit products on Amazon. And again, Amazon does have some liability shield from 230 around the similar dynamic. You've got contents, you've got products on your site. It's not being sold by Amazon, but a third-party seller is selling something that's counterfeit. Now, I do think it could hold Amazon's feet much closer to the flame if they're being held liable for fraudulent or counterfeit products being sold by third-party sellers on Amazon. Very interesting, because as we've reported on Amazon, they pre-pandemic had almost 50% of their top 10,000 sellers were, guess what? Chinese manufacturers. And I can tell you right now, Chinese manufacturers don't always produce genuine products. A lot of counterfeits in those products. And I think that would be a real problem also for Amazon, interestingly enough, on that front. Etsy, for example, is fine because it's all kind of these craft, kind of homemade goods. So they would actually do very well. eBay, I think, also has somewhat of a counterfeit problem as well. We're going to be following this. The media isn't taking this seriously. And here's the irony with all of this. Because it is Trump saying this, the media is immediately against it. The irony in all of this is that 230, striking down 230, actually helps the media, right? Like, before everything got so partisan and crazy and political in this country, the media hated Facebook and Google. So the irony in all of this is that if the media was actually able to kind of not be partisan and be objective, they would actually say, wow, by getting rid of 230, this is actually really good. We should get rid of 230 because Facebook and Google are killing us. And we need every bit of help that we can get. Australia is trying to force Facebook and Google pay the media firms in Australia money to have that as they're distributing their stories through Facebook and Google. So, all of this is really getting to the crux here of saying, there's laws and precedent around liability, around defamation, around, being truthful and reporting correct information. A lot of that has gone out the window for the media for a number of reasons. As we spoke about in depth with Tim, media doesn't really make any money anymore. So how do you get, blood out of a rock? You don't. And B, the bigger problem is really that the distribution mechanism, these content platforms, Facebook and Google, they're actually geared to disseminate fake information. Fake information performs better in the algorithm than true information does, because fake information is more triggering, more incendiary, gets more engagement, and the algos like it better. So the media companies have learned that, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So there is a very big problem here. This is kind of a blunt mechanism to try and solve it, and then it will create other issues if you just wholesale get rid of 230. But hey, I mean, considering how aggressive just censorship has gotten in general and all these other things, net, yeah, something's got to change here. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.